Let me ask our colleague. Yes, Dr. Saidim, please give your additional comment on that.
Thank you, Chairman. The additional comment I wanted to make is on the tax recovery. Chair, we have an outstanding ESC MOU, ESC DTA, double tax agreement that has been pending for some time. And one of the things that DTA has is cross-border tax recovery. And once we have that one in place, maybe one thing that we can do is to amend to ensure that we have the capacity to recover tax cross-border. But there are also other existing tax, the tools to recover taxes like multilateral convention for those countries that have been able to sign. But we also have an existing, the ESCCMA, the act that allows us to exchange information for purposes of recovering of taxes for customs purposes. But DTA will help us deal with the issue of cross-border tax recovery. But now that I have the mic, Chair, there's something that the presenter did not include, is that the team was also seeking an approval of the EARACGs for inclusion of ZRA in the technical committee of the commissioners for investigations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saidim. That is very important. Yes, Diana, you want to come in and say something? Oh, sorry, Stella, please go ahead.
The DTAs and then the other multilateral instruments. But I wanted to specifically comment about the other fora, such as ATAF. ATAF has a cross-border committee, and that committee is quite specific on how to recover taxes cross-border, for instances such as those mentioned. The committee has progressed in terms of coming up with frameworks to do just that. As a matter of fact, we have an engagement that should happen in Kampala next month. It's an ATAF OECD engagement, and that should, among others, discuss avenues such as those to how to recover, how to investigate, and ensure that we get maximum revenue from these multilaterals. I thank you.
Sorry, Stella, did you comment on the DTA? What is the status?
For the DTAs, my colleague had indicated that there are provisions that provide for cross-border recoveries. And what he stated was that we need to amend to ensure that we take into account scenarios such as the present. So what the comment is that we need to amend and take into account such scenarios. That's the comment that came through from my colleague. I was just reiterating.
Okay, but have they been signed or they are still?
No, the DTA has been pending. It's not been signed. Okay. And I think what we need to do is push for it in our different forums to ensure that they are signed.
Yeah, I think that's the recommendation. That's true. So we want to put some timelines, some of these pending activities. So let the responsible teams, I imagine this is legal and DT, whoever is handling this, expedite. One, make sure that they are complete. They have clauses for cross-border tax recovery, but also that the process is concluded and we sign them. And would also like to ask you to complete this in a month. We have signed so many DTAs with many countries. I don't see why we don't do that within the region. CDT, Sarah has something to add on.
Thank you, Seiji. And
sorry, maybe Sarah, before you come in, I forgot to announce, but it has happened naturally. People were hungry, so they've gone to pick the coffee. Would like to recommend that you pick it, come back and take it from your chair. We are racing against time so that we don't lose. We'll have time to stretch out and take the coffee while standing immediately after the next presentation, as we allow the Secretariat to complete the minutes and the communique. So while we are waiting to listen to one more presentation, to get out, if you want a coffee, step out, pick it, come and enjoy it from your chair, or you can even send someone to pick it for you. Thank you. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you, CG, and thank you, Cedric, for that presentation. I'm putting this across just for the Secretariat to consider on the issue of exports, specifically cross-border trade on exports. We are having issues with the VAT refunds, and because of that, we really want to understand how best can we verify these exports, both from the other country, which is receiving the import, and this other country, which is exporting. It came out yesterday, but what we are keenly interested at is, do we have the mechanisms of sharing this cross-border information so that we are able to get the correct value of our tax? If we are refunding this tax, let us refund it for the value that has gone to the other country. We have the one-stop border posts, but is it giving us the best mileage? So I am thinking that the steering committee should also look into this, that we should be able to get information. If the export is, say, going to South Sudan should be able to give us that confirmation on real time together with the Ugandan side. Then still on DTS for export still, we have tax stamps that we should be putting on exports, but we don't. Now we don't put these tax stamps on exports, but the other side, on the country importing, they still put the same tax stamps. We have the same service provider in the EAC for tax stamps. Is it possible that we can have the tax stamps put in the country of manufacture and these goods just go seamlessly the other side? Because we are really getting issues. Some of these goods do not get tax stamps, and they are exempted from excise duty, exempted from VAT, and they are found back into the market, local market, again, creating unleveled ground for competition. So these are things that we could also consider discussing to facilitate domestic trade, and at the same time, the cross-border trade is also facilitated without loss of tax revenue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just allow you to come in a moment. As you mentioned, the exports, the exports are for outside the region. Within the region, there are transfers.
Yeah, okay, transfers. Yeah.
So those are transfers. And the clarification I wanted to know, do they, for example, those transfers, or what would otherwise be exports within the region, do they pay VAT or they don't? Why should the issue of a refund come in?
They don't pay VAT because they are zero rated. And because they are zero rated, we normally refund. It's an incentive within the domestic laws.
But so, isn't that a gap? Because when they are sold here in the local market, they pay VAT.
Yes.
So if the trade between Uganda and Kenya, as an example, is not an export, they should also pay VAT.
It is an export.
It's not. From the angle of East Africa. Yes, Commissioner Castro.
Thank you, CG, and thank you, Commissioner Genos. Yes, I agree with you. It would be a transfer. The only export is outside the East African region. But of recent, I think where CDT is coming from, we have been having issues with DRC goods from Uganda to DRC and South Sudan, and that's where they claim refund. But for other partner states, we've not had that challenge. I think partly because of the harmonization at EAC level on how far they've gone with fast-tracking the signing of the customs union protocols. That's why even now when a vehicle is coming from South Sudan, we still charge import duty. If fish is coming from South Sudan, we charge import duty. But fish from Kenya, traded between Kenya and Uganda, there is no import duty. So there is something still being worked on at EAC. That's why I thought the colleague from the Secretariat could clarify on that issue. But it's particularly with South Sudan and DRC.
Now you've raised the new angle of import duty. CG, you want to say something about this?
I just want to have the Commissioner Kenya Customs to confirm, because I thought a transfer, being a local supply, then you charge VAT, even whether it is between whatever. I also wonder why we would charge goods coming from South Sudan import duty, yet it is within the region, and South Sudan is officially in the EAC. So maybe Commissioner Kenya Customs.
Thank you, CG. CG, the Commissioner Customs has just stepped out, but I can respond partially that all exports or transfers from Kenya to the EAC are almost treated like an export to outside the region. So because VAT is an input-output process, the input when is bigger than output, then it raises a refund status. And I think that is where the Commissioner for DT URA was coming from. Thank you.
Chair, I'm still not satisfied.
That's true. I'm also confused. The explanations seem to be opening up more questions. For the Commissioner Customs, KRA, the question that was directed to you by your CG, let me ask James to repeat it exactly.
We say that goods coming from the EAC region to any of the countries is a transfer, not an export. The question I was asking, if it's a transfer, not an export, I know there is no import duty at the border, but is there VAT? I have always thought there is. So I wanted clarity about that. If it's a transfer, then why would we, and VAT is a local tax. You know, VAT, yeah, it's a domestic tax. If you would sell them, in Uganda and don't charge, and you charge, and then you take them to Kenya and you don't charge, I'm just wondering.
Okay. So thank you, CG. So in terms of the transfers, so export between Kenya and Uganda, for example, there's no import duty because under the EAC protocol and under our rules of origin and all those agreements that we have, imports across the East African partner state is ideally a transfer. So there's no taxes for import duty purposes. Of course, they have to qualify under the rules of origin that they have originated from within the partner state based on the different criteria. For the other taxes, excise, VAT, these are not covered under the EAC protocol because we are looking at it in terms of import duty. So excise, VAT, and all the other levies then will be charged by the different partner states. So until we reach a level where we are able to harmonize that level, the domestic taxes element is not covered under the EAC agreement. And this applies also for COMESA goods and even for ACFTA. As we go into ACFTA, the same treatment applies. So it's only for purposes of import duty.
You have added more confusion. The question is, what do you do at the border? So
I'll talk about under single customs territory. What we do under single customs territory, what we do is Kenya. I'll use Kenya, Uganda again. I'm importing an item from Uganda. So under single customs territory, what happens is the goods, I'm the importer, so I will pay for my taxes. I'll do the declaration and I'll pay for my taxes in Kenya. And then on the Ugandan side, the officers there will do an exit note to dispatch the goods to Kenya. So we pay the taxes in advance on the other side. However, that is for imports. For purposes of import duty, we are one territory. It's basically a transfer. But because each jurisdiction has its own laws that govern the domestic taxes, that then still applies. So VAT will be charged in Kenya at 16%. If it's import into Uganda or Rwanda or Tanzania, it will be 18%. So the 0% duty
only applies to import duty across the partner states. Because under EAC, the agreement we have and under EAC protocol only applies to customs. I don't know if I've confused you further, Cindy.
No, I have understood.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know that we charge.
Yes, we charge.
Our VAT.
Yes.
It is Uganda then which will not charge. If the goods are coming from Uganda, we will collect the VAT, so Uganda will not charge. It's a domestic tax, but it's no duty. Yeah, okay, yes, Uganda will charge if it's an export, is an import. Okay, okay.
No, CDT, Uganda is even not charging VAT. Take an example of rice from Tanzania. We used to charge VAT and we were ruled out of order. We stopped charging. So there is need to harmonize. We are treating these issues very differently because of our domestic taxes, laws not being harmonized. And it's one of the things that was presented to us here yesterday. We need to quickly move on that because now there is unfairness. And then when we don't charge, we also refund those who export. So no wonder we are not hitting targets. Yes, Respa, you want to say something then?
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification on that side, that I think as she's offered clarification that on the import, there is no charge, but on, I mean, there's a charge, but on export, it goes out as zero rated. And that's the reason. Take an example of Bidco, who manufacture locally. So Bidco would bring in import, there's VAT, manufacture, but if it is for export, it is zero rated. And that is the trigger of the huge refunds. So it eats into our bottom line from that angle. So exported remains zero rated, but import duty is applicable. So that actually is the trigger. It causes the accumulation of the refunds. Thank you.
Chair, we are very clear now. I think you charge when you charge in your area, if the goods are coming from Kenya, take your VAT, and I will not charge, because to me it's an export. Also, although it's a transfer, but that's for domestic taxes. And when I'm getting goods from your area, I will collect the VAT. Then you don't collect. I think that's a practice.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, my brother, you wanted to say something from RIA.
Thank you, CG. I just wanted to give some update on the DTA within the region. In the 44th CG's meeting that took place in Zanzibar, we had done a review of the DTA for the region, and so we did some updates. Unfortunately, the CGs realized that it was not within their powers to endorse it, and it was the spark of what was proposed that we create a sectoral committee at the EAC level, so that all the products that need the blessing of the ministers can see their way to the EAC to the EAC level of ministers of finance. Again, that has not been, as we presented yesterday, it has not been able to be, we have not been able to see that done. But the DTA is also on hold because some states have got concerns on some of the areas and how it is implemented. So everything is on hold, and I would say it will take us some time for the DTA to be signed, for the region to be signed. But I would request that, with your permission, CGs, that we go back under the legal subcommittee, review this request on enforcement across the states, that we review all the possible options, of course, within the confines of the law. We review and maybe propose a way that this can be done. Of course, we take note of the ATAF proposals and other framework. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a long time when it is at the continental level. So we believe under the regional level, being that they're willing to implement things is very fast, maybe we can come up with a regional framework of how this can be done. So if you allow us, we can go back under the legal framework, under the legal subcommittee, and maybe come up with a proposal. Thank you, CGs.
Okay, thank you so much, comrade from RRA, for that additional information. The reason for the delay of the regional DT, I didn't exactly pick. What is the issue? Why can't it be expedited? Is it one DT for the whole region?
Yes,
that's the idea.
Yes, the idea. There was a DTA, double tax agreement, that was initiated for the region for all the member states, and some of the states had reached at the level of ratification. Other states were still under review to decide.
Okay.
But after some time, some of the states had to hold their decision to ratify because of other legal framework within states themselves. So that's why it has been pending all this time to be enacted.
Okay.
Yes, and according to those states' laws, it's likely that it's going to again take more time for them to ratify, and then we'll be able to use that.
Okay. I think now that's clearer, whereas we can encourage our respective states to expedite that process, but it's clear that it's beyond the scope of the tax administrations, and it may take longer. So I think what we'll take advantage of, as you rightly said, is to use the other frameworks that are in place and work closely to help each other to recover taxes across the borders. And we accept that proposal. So, Cedric, you have some pending comments to make?
No, I think all is good, apart from the aspect of ZRB, Zambia Revenue Authority, and Sudan, because that's the request we had. And because there is a lot of information, for example, we need from Sudan and all that. So we believe that if they are part of the technical committee, then there are discussions we can hold.
CGs, do you have any reason not to approve that request? We approve. So please, thank you so much, the Tax Investigations Committee, for the excellent job. Asante sana. Thank you. So let us now call the last presentation, which is the Integrity Forum presentation. And after that, we'll take a short break outside. We can stretch our legs, have our coffee, as we allow the Secretariat to prepare for the minutes and the communique. So we will go through this very quickly, and then we'll close for lunch. Most welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. Secretariat, if I could have my PowerPoint on, please. Good morning once again. My name is Rosine Wamaria. I'm the Commissioner of Internal Audit and Integrity, Rwanda Revenue Authority, and I'm the current chair of the East African Revenue Authority Technical Committee. So first of all, I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to present to you our report and to submit to you some of our proposals. For this presentation, I'm going to cover three main points. The first one is the report of the EARACG, and the second one is our proposal for developing a regional integrity and anti-corruption strategy. And the third one will be submitting matters for approval. I'd like to start by saying that our committee, our technical committee, is committed more than ever to double our efforts in promoting integrity and fighting corruption, because we want to minimize the negative impact caused by COVID, and we also want to deal with the ever-rising inflation, the global inflation. And the second objective, we want to improve our perception ranking on Transparency International, so that we create to make EAC a destination of choice. So we'll be sharing our information. We'll continue to share information. We'll continue to share our best practices and solutions for integrity issues. For the current ERTC leadership, Rwanda Revenue Authority is currently the chair of this committee, and we have a term of 2 years. And currently, I'm the current chair of this committee. The hosting Revenue Authority will always be the vice chairperson when we have a meeting. And URA is the secretariat and coordinator of our all activities. For our meetings, we resumed our meeting in 2022, our physical meetings, because we also had a virtual meeting during the pandemic, but in 2022, we resumed our physical meeting. The first one was held in Kigali in April 2022, and the second one was held in Juba, South Sudan in October 2022. And we're planning to have our meeting in April, our next meeting in Bujumbura in April 2023. Allow me to present to you some of the important resolutions, the key achievements, and key priorities that came from our meetings. The first one is the approval of the template of our integrity statistics. We agreed to have to be sharing the statistics to be able to identify or to detect corruption tendencies, so that we have similar data that all RIAs will be sharing. And from here, I can say that we have realized that one of the key priorities should be focusing on financial illicit flows, because this is one of the indicators of corruption, and it's becoming a big issue, not only to EAC, but to the whole continent. The second priority is strengthening investigation. Here, we decided to prioritize proactive investigations, because from the statistics we have, we realize that most of our investigations are reactive instead of being proactive. So we want to, we agreed to increase our proactive investigations so that we are able to deter malpractices before they actually occur. And for these proactive investigations to be successful, we want to leverage on the data that we have. So we'll be using data analytics. Some of our RIAs are already using data analytics to be able to identify and to anticipate the corruption tendencies and other offenses that can happen. So intelligence and risk management were also noted as the key drivers for proactive investigations. The third priority is on this regarding the strengthening investigation. We'll continue to share best practices regarding integrity investigations in general. Talking on financial illicit flows, this is a cross-cutting, this is a cross-cutting issue, but as a committee on integrity, we want to really focus on this issue and provide mitigating strategies. So one of the strategies we have is to implement the lifestyle audit, and this was a recommendation from the CG's meeting of 2018. So here I would like to share with you a progress report of how RIAs are performing in terms of implementing lifestyle audit. In Burundi, they are still working on the legal framework for the lifestyle audit, so they haven't undertaken any audit. In Kenya, they conducted 16. This is a period of 6 months, 16 audits, and they also conducted background checks, 410 background checks, and 962 vetting. For Rwanda, it's still new, but the executive organ has approved the lifestyle guidelines. So far, we've undertaken 2 audits, and we conducted background checks for 54 staff. And for vetting, we are currently not doing vetting for promotion. We are just using the performance appraisals. For Uganda, for lifestyle audit, they conducted 8 background checks, 2, and vetting for promotion, 47. And South Sudan, they are still learning this new approach, and other areas have agreed to share their experience and to support them in developing all the requirements for conducting lifestyle audit. For Tanzania, here on lifestyle audit, I think they have conducted 1, but they're also in the process of benchmarking with Kenya to be able to conduct this lifestyle audit. So here is the progress report in regard to the lifestyle audit. Other important information that we'd like to share with you is that we are planning to harmonize our training curriculum because we planning to enhance, strengthen our investigation function. We are also planning to have a curriculum that can to have advanced skills for our investigators and also our ethics personnel. So this is one of our key milestones, to have a curriculum or a strategy of developing expertise in our region. The third one is developing integrity and anti-corruption strategy. We realize that we want to move as a region, so we need to have a regional strategy on integrity and anti-corruption, and this will have the same goals. We will have a plan of actions, and a monitoring will be able to have a monitoring mechanism in place. Another important information is that, as I mentioned earlier, we have our meeting in Bujumbura, and the thematic area for 2023 will be enhancing integrity through proactive investigations. Chair, I would like to present to you our approach that we're intending to use to develop the regional integrity strategy. We would like to first start with conducting an assessment of all revenue. Each revenue will conduct an assessment, and the assessment, we want to use the WCO Arusha Declaration. We want to use the WCO Arusha Declaration. And we chose the WCO Arusha Declaration. We first of all analyzed other tools that we have, but we realized that the Arusha Declaration provides a comprehensive, many data, many factors that should be considered when you are measuring, when you are assessing the level of integrity. Here are the principles of the Arusha Declaration that we are considering to use as the factors, as the main components for measuring, assessing our level of integrity. We have leadership and commitment. We look at regulatory framework. We look at transparency. We also look at automation. We look at reform and modernization. And we also analyze our audit and investigation functions. We look at the different code of conduct of different revenue authorities. And we look at human resource management and morale and organization culture. And we also look at the relationship with the private sector. This is the model that we want to use, but again, because we want something that is quantitative, we are proposing to use the balanced scorecard of TADAT. So we want to use this TADAT scorecard, where we have A, which represent the score beyond 8 to 10, which is known as a good practice, and then B, which is beyond 5 to 8, and this is just a good performance. And then we have C, which ranges between 3 to 5, and this represents a weak performance. And we also have D, which is inadequate, which is below 3, and that represents inadequate performance. And from there, after getting this assessment done, we'll be able to design a strategy that addresses the issues that we'll have identified in our respective assessment. So here is just an example of, there's some other information on this side. So here are the principles of the Arusha Declaration. So this is an example of the assessment, the baseline assessment done in Uganda. So this is the principles, the factors that we'll be looking at. And the blue line shows the baseline. And from the result that we have here, you can see 7 dimensions were under performance because they are under 5. And if we could have the rest of the information. And they also had 3 other dimensions that were above 5, where it shows that they are performing well. So this is the example of the assessment that we are planning to conduct and the model that we are planning to use. So from there, you can develop a strategy map. For the interest of time, I won't go into details of that, but the objective is to have, to improve revenue authorities' credibility, to increase trust with our stakeholders, which will also increase the voluntary compliance. So the pillars of our integrity will be to have, to prioritize prevention. We'll be having a number of preventive activities in our strategy, and then we will use modern techniques like data analysis, intelligence, and we are planning to have risk management so that we have a risk register of corruption risks and set mitigating strategies before to avoid all the issues that can occur when we are aware. And the third one is accountability. We will streamline our disciplinary procedures and review our code of conduct to make sure that those who choose not to comply are sanctioned and they are held accountable. So this is about our strategy. And here we have, this is our last slide. We have some of the issues that we would like to seek your guidance and your approval. We have this regional integrity anti-corruption strategy. We would like to seek your guidance and your approval for EARACG to assess the integrity levels. Each EARACG to start assessing the integrity level by June 2023. So we have the report on the assessment by June 2023. And then we would like to request you to approve the approach we want to use of the WCO Arusha Declaration as the core tool and the TADAT score guide. And here we are also requesting of CGs to approve, for each EARACG to contribute 3 technical staff to develop the regional integrity and anti-corruption strategy. We basically here are the resources that we are requesting for availing those technical staff to work on this strategy. And then here it means that we'll be funding expenses, travel and meeting costs related to the designated personnel. For the harmonized capacity building, we would like to request the CG to support in engaging ATAF to provide trainings for investigators. They have a good programs like the one they provided to the investigation. So we would like to have to take the same approach for benefiting from that from those trainings. And for lifestyle audit, we would like the CGs to continue fast-tracking the establishment of the legal framework for conducting lifestyle audit in the revenue authorities that haven't done so. And then we will like CGs to continue encouraging other revenue authorities to support and provide assistance, especially in benchmarking of the three main areas that we have seen, especially the lifestyle audit. So this is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you very much, the Integrity Committee, for that very informative presentation. I wish you could keep on the slide of approvals so that we are able to pronounce ourselves. Again, as you notice, the committee has done a great job. They have clearly pointed out areas where they need our support and approval. So can we give quick comments and give our approvals on those three areas? First of all, any quick comments or suggestions on what should be changed before we get to approvals? We seem to be quite in agreement that the committee has done a great job. Can we therefore quickly pronounce ourselves on these areas? And CG James, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the committee for the work. I think this recommendation number 3 about nominating 3 staff, that is a bit too high a number. If you put together all our 6 revenue administrations, that to be putting together 18 people, it's my view that a committee of that nature can't work. We just need one representative from the region with the relevant knowledge, experience to handle that.
One per country.
Yes, one per country, so that it is easier for us to facilitate them wherever they want to meet. They can consult back home with the others, there is no problem. That covers the issue of funding. The question of assessing each area to assess the integrity levels by June 2023, I was just wondering, hasn't that happened? Is it that they do not know what do you mean by assessing integrity levels? I just need clarity on that. Then the rest of the things I think are okay with me.
Thank you very much, James. Very good recommendations. Any other additional comments on this? So clarify on the issue of integrity assessment, but from the comments from the CGs, we approve those recommendations with the adjustment on the numbers. Okay? Please, you're welcome to make that clarification.
Thank you, Chairperson. For the comment from CG Kenya, I think having one, it's noted. We are going to change, to amend the proposal and put one representative from each RA as you guided. For the integrity assessment, we have realized some of our revenue authorities have been conducting the assessment to know where we are, to know the current status, but we realized that we were using different tools, we were using different measurements, so that we can't really compare where we are, so that we can design one strategy, harmonized strategy. That's why we propose to use one model so that we can have, we can conduct an assessment where the result will be easy to interpret, and also to design, to be used for the designing of the strategy. So this is basically what we want to request, so that we can conduct one assessment using the same methodology, and that will be the baseline for the integrity status in our revenue authorities.
Thank you very much. Is that clear? So thank you. You have something? Okay. Thank you very much. Well, let's appreciate the Integrity Committee as we welcome the final presentation before we take a short break, which is digital tax. Asante sana. We welcome the person from KRA representing the digital tax. And this will be the final one. Then we take a short break as we convene after 15 minutes to conclude today's session.
Thank you, CGs. My name is Hakamba Wangwe. I'm a chief manager at KRA, Domestic Taxes Department. And on one hand, I'm normally in charge of the tax invoice management system. But on the other hand, I'm also in charge of the taxation of digital economy. So I'll go straight to the presentation. It's going to be a short one. So we can go to the next slide. So basically, this presentation was not part of the program today, but due to the interest that was drawn, we are honored as KRA to be able to share our journey when it comes to what we have implemented so far in terms of taxation of the digital economy. So this came up at the height of the COVID pandemic. While we know that during that time we suffered a lot of heartache when it comes to our social economical norm, but on the other hand, a lot of things that were happening that were defining how else people could work in the height of lockdowns, in the height of maybe reducing our staff from the offices. We now know that we can work from home. I know some of the revenue authorities are still having that model of working from home and being able to be productive at the same time. So, but when people are working from home, or maybe appreciating the fact that we can get some products online, then there's some business opportunities that actually occurred during that time and have grown. But these are being facilitated by us being able to access internet, because it's key, and also the growth of the electronic commerce and also mobile money to facilitate the payments that we need to make for these products. So with digitization, we are transforming our lives. In Kenya, I don't think there's anything that does not have an app for it. You can choose to go to the supermarket and buy your products, but you can also order your products online and still get them delivered to your home. You can, for some reason, get a prescription online and have your medications delivered to your house. So one of my children have a T-shirt. It's written, I have an app for that, meaning that there's nothing possibly you can imagine that cannot have a digital aspect to it. So with all this progress that we have in technology, we also, even as revenue authorities, have been able to generate a lot of data. And some of this data is coming as a result of automation. What we are doing in automation, we have service providers. Some of us may have servers outside the country. For some aspects, we are getting we have to use Zoom, for example. We are using Zoom, we are using WebEx. This is information that is within our domain. But unfortunately, even as we generate all this data, to the extent of knowing that our topography has changed so much that even when it comes to tax recruitment, we cannot really rely on the traditional way of recruitment of taxpayers where you need to find them in their premises. We now know that some of our taxpayers now have moved to the online space, and those two, whether they are resident taxpayers or whether they are taxpayers without permanent establishment, they are our taxpayers because they are interacting with our citizens and they must pay their fair share of taxes. But when it comes to taxation, still, our sectors are not in harmony with this growth. We find that our tax policies are still geared towards the traditional environment, and we have gaps when it comes to appreciating the new norm where technology is involved. When you go to the next slide, at the height of the COVID pandemic, KRA had to look at these gaps that we are having and decided to think of legislation, first of all legislation, to govern this space, because we did not have these scenarios before. So when it comes to digital tax, when you think about goods going through the border, even being ordered from some countries abroad, maybe Europe or US, they will go through the border and tax will be charged duly. But when it comes to services, we all are, even as we speak, interacting with some of these digital service providers. Is it WhatsApp? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? These are taxpayers who are not necessarily present in our jurisdictions, and yet they're making money out of our jurisdictions. For VAT purposes, we already had provisions for VAT for B2B transactions, but we had gaps when it came to B2C transactions, and therefore when we were coming up with these regulations, we were taking into consideration the gaps that we had. We did not have income tax for digital services, and we also did not have VAT for B2C transactions at the time. I'm going to say at the time because there has been changes on this one also. Also identifying that we now have the digital marketplaces, some domiciled within our jurisdictions, who are holding a lot of data, for example, Jumia. For people who are trading on that platform, who are supposed to be registered taxpayers, but may not necessarily be registered for tax. So we also started engagements with these digital platforms so that we can be able to enhance compliance, not just considering what we need to do for the digital taxpayers who do not have permanent establishment, but also enhance compliance for taxpayers who are our resident taxpayers who may not be operating on the traditional platforms for purposes of them complying and paying their taxes. So what it took for us to be able to do this, we needed to build capacity. And what was most important is establishing a dedicated team who strictly, especially when it comes to the digital services for taxpayers who are non-residents, we needed a dedicated team who would be able to build capacity and have a good understanding on the operations of the digital economy in Kenya. So these officers' main work in any day is to work at identifying potential taxpayers or sources of revenue. We may identify the taxpayers, for example, even among us. When we do it very quickly today, we can identify even 50, because each one of us can name one. So that one you name maybe is not known to me, and it might be an opportunity for us to be able to recruit that person. But when it comes to sources of revenue, for example, Twitter is the quick one. to identify because we all interact with Twitter. But recently, they started charging for verification of accounts. Most of us know that. But did we know that it's a source of revenue? So this team, that's their work. They're actually online most of the time, trying to mine data. Most of this work that they do is starting from the point of what they know to what they don't know. So starting from what you know, there are common apps everyone uses, but what you don't know, you try to find who is the other person who knows another person who knows another person. For example, we know that some of our tax agents have multinational presence. So when we interact, for example, with PwC, they're actually able to give us pointers for some of the taxpayers who may be unknown to us and who may be subject to recruitment and them to pay taxes in Kenya. Or in our interactions with the OECD, we've been members in OECD since 2016. We have a lot of stakeholder engagement with this. This team has been helpful to us. We've had some engagements with the business industry and advisory committee. This committee is made up of some of the non-resident taxpayers with no permanent establishment. So in the process of us showing them what we are doing for DST and DMS, sometimes once in a while, there's a sitting that I think at one sitting we were able to recruit 4 out of the members who attended that session. It was a virtual session. But then we don't just take from them. We also try to see what we can do to improve their processes in Kenya. So they have to file returns in Kenya. However, if they have points of discomfort or if they need clarifications, we are there to be able to facilitate them so that we make the experience as seamless as possible. So back to the team that is working on this, what they do in any day is that we've tried to limit a lot of contact for these non-resident taxpayers. What we realize is that they do not like being disturbed. So even within the teams, we have specific people, like 3 people who can reach out, for example, to Facebook. No other person is allowed to talk to Facebook so that they know, they build the familiarity of who, once they're contacted, they know that that is KRA and they may need to be able to respond to them. So even for the TSOs, this list for the non-resident taxpayers is out of bounds for our tax service offices, sorry, I said TSO. So for our tax service offices, the stations, the KRA stations, whenever they have to interact, all these taxpayers have been put under one station so that you can be able to have visibility of them. But then only this team that is dealing with digital economy can contact them. And even within this team, there's an account management perspective to it and relationship management so that we only have a few people who can be able to contact them in case they need clarification or in case they need to follow up on unpaid taxes. So the success factors, when you're looking at them, we talked about legislation. We've had to review sometimes the legislation, for example, for VAT. At first, we only had provisions for B2C transactions, but we realized there was a gap in that when it came to B2B transactions, the condition for a taxpayer not to charge VAT in that aspect was that the person who is a resident taxpayer was supposed to declare to the non-resident taxpayer that they would account for VAT. So in this case, the declarations were not coming forth. And then in line with best practice internationally, we just collapsed the two. B2B and B2C right now, they all are paid for, they're accounted for by the non-resident taxpayer. We have provided a simplified registration framework and also filing so that the route that these taxpayers take is not the same one that our resident taxpayers take for purposes of simplifying their work. Just thinking about the fact that these taxpayers are trading in over 200 countries worldwide, so they are going to have different modalities in which to account for their taxes, and the best thing we can do for them is simplify this process so that they also can have a convenient experience and be able to go on with their duties. Something I should mention about this, I've talked about most of the aspects, the bit about this being driven at corporate level, because as I mentioned, it's an initiative that is fairly new. that needs a lot of guidance. So at Commissioner General level, we've had engagements where we are able to discuss what we are doing, perhaps get guidance on how best to do some of the initiatives we are doing, or get support in the event we are trying to reach out to a stakeholder and we are unable to, then it can be taken up at an appropriate level and we're able to address our issues. So, what have we achieved so far? We started in 2021, and when you see, like, I've divided DST, digital service tax, and VAT, remembering that digital service tax is at 1.5%, we can see we have a lot of growth, starting from 44 million in 2020-2021. At this point, midway, up to January, we are at 207 million, or $1.6 million. When it comes to VAT, because it's at 16%, and I mentioned that we collapsed both the business-to-business transactions and B2B and B2C, so that all of them are chargeable to tax by the non-resident taxpayers, then you can see that we have a big growth this year, 2020-2023, given that our target, I don't know if I should mention it here, our target is 2.4 billion, but we're at 2.2 right now. Media, I hope my target won't go up. So, okay, for VAT, our target is, for the DST, our target is 379 million. We are at 207. I'm going to regret this, but in total, we are supposed to bring in 2.8 billion for this financial year. We are doing very well. We will not be under performance watch. Next slide. So even as we think that we are doing well, we are growing. For registered taxpayers, we are at 178 registered taxpayers. But once in a while, we wake up to this. The biggest challenge we have is that with the global discussions on Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 framework, the biggest ask from the global front is that we need to drop DST. But for Kenya, you can see, for us, we are projecting that in the next 3 years, we should have collected 13.9 billion. But then, this is just from DST at 1.5%, but then on the other side, we can see that there's pressure on KRA to drop DST so that we can be able to participate in the global discussions on Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. The other challenges that I can mention maybe very quickly, the legal perspective, I've talked about it, that we had to collapse B2B and B2C transactions. But the biggest one that was pointed out, and probably something that all of us will encounter, is the enforcement aspect of it. These taxpayers are largely compliant, but then we have non-compliance aspects to it. So the process of identifying non-resident taxpayers doing business in Kenya, verifying what they've paid against what should really be payable, then that's a problem. And also for non-compliant taxpayers, how do we make them, how do we enforce, how do we make them comply? So what we are doing currently towards this, it's a work in progress, but we have been collaborating with our financial institutions, the banks, and the card schemes. For the banks, what we have been able to achieve so far is that they're able to give us data of the payment transactions. Most of the time, it's unstructured data. We have to share with our corporate data office for it to be put in a structured form and for us to be able to analyze this data to see if we can be able to identify taxpayers who have not been registered for DST and are subject to registration and follow up on them. The other front that we've not been quite successful, if we go to just the previous slide, is our engagement with the communication regulator, because what we are doing is that we are looking at the gates where the information might be passing through and seeing if we can get any information. The bottom line is recruitment, and then we see if we can be able to raise taxes out of them. And also for CBK, but again, this is work in progress that is being done at corporate level. Our benchmarking studies, especially when it comes to enforcement, when you look at countries like Mexico and Barbados, in the event a taxpayer does not comply, they actually block their airwaves for them so that they don't do business in that country until they comply. We are not yet there as a country, but it's an approach other countries are using to be able to push this non-resident taxpayer to comply according to the requirements of that country. We are still working on developing back office modules that also facilitate the compliance and enforcement for these taxpayers, so that we can be able to do this through the system. And also, I think discussions have started picking up now on to government agencies, especially at this period of time, so that they can be able to support the enforcement and compliance mechanisms that we have in place for DST and VAT. The other challenge is, of course, the global discussions are going on, so sometimes they interrupt us in the process of collecting taxes, but what we know is that for whatever information that we have right now, we do participate in the global forums. In the event that we have to make this decision where are we dropping DST or are we not dropping DST, at least we'll be able to be making that decision from a point of information, given that we have access to some of these taxpayers, and we have collected revenue towards taxation of digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that very detailed and very encouraging presentation on the strides that KRA has made in this footprint. We all look up to you, and we are definitely ready to follow this path. Can I welcome a few questions? I see CDT EARACG's hand is already up, and CG Juma. So let's start with CG Juma, then CDT, and then we go to another question from our brother from OBR.
Thank you, Chairman. I commend the presentation, well presented. I commend Kenya for the initiative and the revenue that has been collected. Now, a few points to note. One is it appears the dedicated team is key for collection of these type of taxes, both VAT and DST. Now, I think we need to learn from Kenya. Who are these staff? What capacity can we train to them, and which areas to consider? I would request our partner from Kenya, out of this discussion, to share more on how we can build the dedicated and capacity team in managing this task. The other point is on the enforcement and compliance. We learned from them they have not done well on enforcement and compliance. One is no cooperation with the communication authorities. I think this is an area to note with our respective communication authorities on how we can do like other countries, which he has mentioned. Although our impact is small in shutting down their services, but I think that we must have the measures on how we can enforce compliance. In absence of that, they'll just be paying on their own willing, and that's not how tax is. So we may come with the measures on how we adopt the measures for enforcement on their compliance. The last part on the pressure to drop the DST, my point is even the rate itself is very low, 1.5%. So I would suggest, Chairman, as we discuss out of this meeting, let us include this in our communique. I don't think whether there is any state which is not willing to collect this tax. We're all eager to collect this type of tax. If that is the case, they've not told us the reasons for why there are pressures to drop from 1.5 and to remain with the VAT. My suggestion is, if we adopt, we should find reasons on why we should not drop. They should not drop, and others also should not drop. And in addition, we should find reasons on why we can raise from 1.5 to above, based on the suggestion from technical team. If we do that, I think we'll be able to tap the potential that will keep existing in this type of tax base which were not taxed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Comrade CG ZRA. That is well noted. OBR, then CDT.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. As mentioned through the presentation, the multinational enterprises such as WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, just to mention a few, reach into our respective countries, and they carried out business activity without any physical presence in a given country, and thus create no taxable presence in our respective countries. From your experience, how Kenya Revenue Authority have worked to ensure that the amendment of the domestic tax law meet the need of the country, including particularly, especially dealing with the current imbalance in the allocation of taxing rights. And therefore, to address the issue of artificial shifting to help stream illicit financial flows in Kenya. The second question is, how many DTA, double taxation agreement, have already signed so far with other countries in order to eliminate double taxation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kenya, for that presentation, and especially for leading from the front. We are looking up to you, especially on the digital service tax. We appreciate the pressure, the pushback. However, I just wanted a few things, a few clarifications. Uganda has only VAT, and we are yet to consider the digital service tax. And our VAT is based on a quarterly filing. So this online people have to pay every quarter, every 3 months. I wanted to see the Kenya's experience on the monthly filing. How is it going? And then we also got a pushback on the use of the US dollar. They are requesting that they should use the US dollar to pay the tax. And we saw it makes a lot of sense, so that they do not have the issues of the Forex affecting their tax ledgers. What is your take on that? And then we realized that a number of these online platforms keep coming up. So what our experience is that we need to be on the lookout to see where is money coming out from. Recently, we saw on social media some children who do singing in Masaka being paid 5 billion, YouTube. So how have you been able to collect some money from YouTube? Because I don't know who owns YouTube. Is it part of Google? And then the other one is customs. Many people do transactions of this, like through Amazon, you buy goods, they come through customs. But we also think that there are some of these goods that pass through our borders without paying customs taxes. So this just gives us the justification that we really need to introduce the digital service tax, which taxes the income on some of these transactions. I just wanted to also see your experience. How did you keep growing the portfolio of these clients? How are you identifying them? And we have been able to consult the central bank, but it's not forthcoming. We are engaging the commercial banks. And so it's really a slow process. And then with the pushbacks from these same online platforms, they give endless excuses. Others say, give us 1 month, give us this, we want this, so many excuses. But we are there. We've actually started on it. We've collected some tax. Thank you so much for your presentation, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hakamba. Now you can first respond to those questions.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Before you go on, CGRRA, you wanted to ask. Yes. Sorry, I'm not senior.
I thought maybe they would have a second wave, but let me go ahead with my questions. First of all, thank you for your presentation. And again, as said by other colleagues, Kenya is really the trailblazer in the region for us, and we look forward to learning a lot from you. My first question deals with the legal framework that you established for this digital service taxation framework. So we would like, if possible, if there could be, after this meeting, we'll talk with CG, the possibility of having online meetings to learn a little bit more about that legal environment. If you can organize 1 or 2 sessions, because we want to hear about it quickly, as soon as possible. Some online sessions with us, but of course, we keep it open for the rest of the member states who are interested. Kenya would let us know and invite us, and then we would have these sessions together to learn about how, on the legal side, this was organized. This is a proposal. Secondly, from the presentation, I do understand that there are 2 types of taxes that are involved here. An indirect tax, that is VAT, on the digital service itself, which is paid by 2 kinds of clients. There's the end consumer, and there are also businesses who are renting space on digital platforms that may be paying VAT on those services. So my question is, in relation to that, that's the first type of tax. And then the second type of tax is these digital service provider, Netflix and so on, name them, themselves, they pay a direct tax, which is withheld because they are offered a market in our countries and they profit from our country. Therefore, there's a profit tax that they have to give us. Since they are not registered with us, I'm interested in knowing now, let me go systematically. For the VAT, first of all, then I'll move on to the profit tax later. First, on the indirect tax, the VAT, for the business to consumer, I understand, okay, the transaction may stop there, it's okay. But for the business to business transaction, when a business is paying VAT on a digital service, how do you gather the information that these businesses, these local businesses, when they come to ask for a refund on their inputs, on the VAT on inputs, because that's an input for them, for example. They're acquiring a certain service, they're paying VAT on it, they are entitled to get a refund on that VAT on input. This is one. Secondly, I want to know, how do you check the veracity of those declarations? Do you have an integration with your ITAS? How does it happen? We would like to hear about that. The second thing is, how do you register? What kind of arrangement do you have for a registration of these digital service providers, so that when they pay for when you retain the 1.5% tax, which is currently being applied, which we've heard that it's being proposed that it be raised. I think in one discussion, informal discussion we had, we were thinking of 5%. I don't know if we're going formalize that in this meeting as a recommendation, but how do you capture that information about this is this digital service provider that paid this withholding tax on each transactions? Do you have a system specific for that, or is it part of your ITAS, or maybe there's an integration between an external system and your ITAS? I don't know. We would like to hear a bit more about that. I think that's one. The second, that last question is more in relation to the direct tax on the profit made by this digital service provider. We would love to hear a little bit more details about that, if possible. Thank you.
I think you can now go ahead to respond to those questions.
Okay, thank you. As I respond to the questions, I'm going to ask for help for one question. Dr. Saidimu, on how many DTAs we've signed with other countries. But I'll start responding, and then I've seen the commissioner also who may step in. So the issue about the dedicated team, what we did, the younger staff, they interact with the internet a lot. There's so much that they are able to, even just common knowledge that they are able to use to bring to the table as prospective taxpayers who we can be able to register. But apart from that, I mentioned about data mining. And we start from the point where we have the open source systems. We have the Google, for example. Being able to Google, find out, that's what I'm saying, especially when you look at it by sector, find out some of the digital service providers that are interacting in a certain sector. So just identifying what you're looking for. First of all, having a focus on what we are looking for, which sectors do we think are operating on the digital space, and then now trying to find as many as possible of these taxpayers from the open source platforms. Also sharing lists. Sometimes when we have the stakeholder engagements, engagements with other countries, other revenue authorities, we know that they are able to build a database. For example, last we have a database of 178 taxpayers. Us asking, as you may, from these revenue authorities about that list, so that we identify in their list which ones are occurring in our jurisdiction. So with these digital service providers, not all of them transact in every jurisdiction, but you'll find some that are common, that you're able to use this information that you're receiving to be able to recruit them and have them pay taxes. And then also the interactions I mentioned we have with ETAF for the technical support. And this team, apart from them doing their normal work, at any time they are attending a lot of technical capacity building sessions with ETAF and also OECD, with a view of, one, having visibility of what is happening in the global front, and two, trying to identify areas where we may need support from these bodies. And once that support is provided, then it goes to helping this team to be able to do their work better. But on identifying the staff, I think I would start from a point where they need to have a hands-on approach towards the digital space. Sometimes for us, it might not be our favorite place to be, but for the young people, it's an area that they're transacting constantly. And this, when you put it together, it comes to build to a lot when it comes to the taxpayers we need to recruit. Our cooperation with the Communication Authority, I just mentioned that we have been having engagements, but then you find sometimes for government agencies, what may be our objective might not be their objective at that time. But I also mentioned that at this point in time, as we speak, it's a conversation that we are picking up again, and hopefully this time round, because we are heading towards now this common objective as government agencies, we should be able to have some level of success when it comes to what we need from them or how they can be able to support our processes. Yes, the pressure to drop DST, the rate is too low, I agree, but what our intention was when we were starting this is, first of all, to establish the database. So at 1.5, it's a rate, first of all, we will not, as we recruit these taxpayers, we will not start from the point of the argument of it is too high. So we needed to build the database, and maybe I know at some point there was a proposal in our legislation to increase it to at least 3%. That has not come through yet, but when it gets to that point where it's comfortable for us to increase the rate, then of course this is something that we need to take action upon. So when it comes to amendments, when we are onboarding the multinational enterprises, those ones who have presence, not permanent establishment, but they have presence in our jurisdiction, what we do is that we make sure that there's a lot of stakeholder engagement. I'll mention one which it's one of the questions I should be responding to. When it came to us collapsing B2B and B2C transactions, we had to have these conversations with them because the issue of claiming input tax now would come up, especially for B2B transactions. And how were we going to be able to know that truly someone incurred this input tax as a result of trading with a taxpayer who is a non-resident taxpayer with no permanent establishment? So at that point, when we were making these amendments, we did have these stakeholder engagements with these teams, and basically explored various options in which they would be able to facilitate us with the information of the people who they're trading with, so that on our end we have visibility and can allow or not allow the claiming of input tax. At that point, the consideration was having a system integration so that we can automatically have this information. When we had this meeting with this Business and Industry Advisory Committee, we were accompanied by South Africa, SARS, and Nigeria, FIRS, because we had common interests. The feedback we received from these non-resident taxpayers was that because they're having a lot of interactions in various countries, the issue of a system integration was not very attractive to them, so to speak. But they appreciated for KRA with our integrated system, iTax, we had provision where they could actually just upload that list of taxpayers who they're dealing with, and they settled on the fact that they can't give us this information for the time being, even as we make consideration of having a simpler way to be able to do that. So as we speak, when it comes to amendments, we also follow up with the system to see if they can also be able to use the system to a certain extent, and for now they have actually agreed to give us the list through the return, and that's what we are using for cross-verifying this information. So I think bottom line, what I'm trying to say is a lot of stakeholder engagement. Cannot take moves without first just passing it by them. The same thing happens with the use of the dollar. They would like to pay with dollars. They'd like to make their tax payments quarterly. But then we are looking at also, we are firm on what our law demands, that they need to make their declarations in Kenya shillings, and we need them to do the returns monthly. So we had several engagements with them until we settled that they'll be able to do this. But for their declarations, because when it comes to their transmissions, of course, they will transmit in dollars. What we try to emphasize to them is them making their tax payments early, because there's normally a time lag between the time when the tax transmissions are made and the time when actually the dollar conversion is done, so that they don't fall outside the time that they're required to do. It's not 100%, but it's a work in progress. It's something that we are working towards, that they all shorten the time within which they start making the declarations to factor in the other aspects that we'd like to take care of. Going forward, I think the issue of the tax payments in dollars, I think it's an issue of consideration, but it has not been finalized yet. So for digital service tax and VAT, our focus is on services, strictly services, because we know that the goods are taken care of cross-border. So we have the same customs points where someone is supposed to declare their duty and declare their VAT. That's the point where for goods that are coming from non-resident taxpayers without permanent establishment, that's the point where they actually make the tax declarations. But for this implementation and the legislation is strictly focusing on services. We are not focusing on goods on this one. growing the portfolio, yes, I mentioned, it's one, borrowing from other revenue authorities, using the open source provisions that we have, and also third-party information and the information that is available to us. We right now have the financial institutions, the banks giving us some data sets within which we're able to get this information. At some point, what we did a test with KRA. We asked them for the service providers. We know that we are doing a lot of automation, so we are transacting with these taxpayers. So out of this, we were able to pick out a few, so that the next step was that we try to ask that from other government agencies, so that we see if we can identify others that we can be able to recruit. So it's just about strategy and just trying to see where else can I get information from. I think the CG will respond on the issue of having the online meetings with the Rwandese team. Yeah, I mentioned about the claiming of input tax, and that we've not had an integration with these non-resident taxpayers, but they use iTax to make their declarations and also to file. What we've done also, we've provided them guidelines on the website so that it simplifies the manner in which they are able to access these platforms and are able to make their tax declarations themselves. In the event some feel that this might be too much, we also have a provision in law for them to appoint a tax representative to make their tax declarations on their behalf. I think up to that point.
Okay. I think most of the questions have been responded to. What probably I would encourage, and that's what we are discussing with the CG Rwanda here. We are open to engagement. We just sound me, CGs, through email, then I'll organize a virtual engagement between our staff to get more understanding. And even if you want to have a visit, there is no problem. We are very happy to receive guests. And, but let's start virtually so that there is much information. I think the bigger question that was raised by CG Zanzibar is we started by just being nice to these people. We started easy filing, a lower rate, self-assessment. Now we are moving in, as we explored the question of how are we going to enforce. And that is the phase we are getting in now, to see now how do we use technology to enforce. So we have started, now we will think through about the enforcement angle. And now that we have started easy, you don't have to start the same way. You can, if you have the capacity to enforce, we would be glad to have that. So I would encourage, because of time, we get that other forum where we can organize a virtual, where all our technical people within the region log in, whether it's go for whatever hours, whatever number of times. It's just setting up a link and a time, and all the experts back at home will be available to provide the required feedback. I think the only thing to worry about is the pushback from the OECD member countries. You shouldn't worry too much about that. I think we will deal with that, cross that bridge as we reach there. For now, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush. And as a Ugandan, when you go to Rome, you do as Romans do, Asante sana. Thank you, Hakamba. I now, because of time, I'm trying to manage time. Now we have come to the end of the platform program. We want to take a few minutes breaks so that we allow the team, the secretariat, to develop the minutes and the resolutions in the next 15 minutes. As we take tea, always we fold our arms a little bit and our legs. You just take 15 minutes to prepare the resolutions. We'll be back here to go through those resolutions, adopt them, and then off we go for lunch, and after that we enjoy Uganda. So I will bring the meeting to that formal adjournment for the next 15 to 20 minutes. You let me know that you are ready. The Secretariat, we expected that you are up to speed. Under the Africa initiative I headed for 2 years, we would not have had a break. It means that the team would have been ready by now. You would have logged in immediately and presented. But because we are not sure the model you are used to, we'll give you 15 to 20 minutes to put your house in order, and then we come and deal with that very important assignment, so that we create time to enjoy the Ugandan environment. Thank you very much. See you then.